campus to purchase a tree certificate in honor of someone you care about. Additionally, I want to let you know about Alternative Break, an opportunity to travel and volunteer in Israel this summer for free with Jewish National Fund and Yavneh on campus. I'll be going. I hope you'll join me. You can learn about the details and register at jnf.org/break. Please join us for our next program tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. EST. It's called Forest Fires and Firefighters, the U.S.-Israeli Brotherhood. We're looking forward to seeing you there at that. Additionally, I want to issue the calling out to all budding architects, landscape designers, artists, and sculptors from all over the world. Submit your ideas for the Envision Tomorrow's Israel competition. Jewish National Fund USA is building a world-class campus in Beersheba, Israel, that will revolutionize Zionist and Jewish educational engagement for the decades ahead. We're looking forward to unique design concepts for key elements of this village, including dormitories, high school classrooms, conference center space, cafes, houses of worship, outdoor gardens, entranceways, donor walls, and more. You can enter today and you can win up to $8,600. You can find the information for that at jnf.org/village. As for the program tonight, we have a really exciting and unique program lined up. A Tu BiShvat Seder, which will also have a heavy focus on the environment, environmental awareness, and activism, run by some amazing students who are involved with Yavneh as well as the JNF. I don't want to take up too much more time. I want them to take up the bulk of the time, but I want to start by giving them a brief shout out. First of all, the Tu BiShvat Seder tonight was visioned by three of our really amazing students. So they're on this call right now. So Sarah Smart, a student at Cornell, and Sam Clark, a student at the University of Florida, as well as Sean Regenbaum, student at the University of Georgia Tech. These are some of the amazing student leaders that we have in Yavneh, students who have done quite a bit of time, who have done some amazing programs on their campuses, and who are also deeply involved in our kind of national board Yavneh structure, which does work kind of with students all over the country. So at this point, I want to pass it over to them. I think Sam is going to start for the night, kind of leading us in the Seder tonight, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that very kind introduction. It's so great to see so many familiar and so many new faces. I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone tonight. Tonight marks the beginning of Tu BiShvat, and this is a very special holiday, a little bit underrated in the Jewish calendar. Everyone thinks about Pesach and Purim. Those are the big ones that are coming up soon. And I just want to take a couple moments to explain what we'll be doing tonight. We'll be having a Seder, similar to what you have over Passover, over Pesach. So we will have 4 cups of wine or grape, just depending on how old you are. And we'll be going through the Sheva Minim, the 7 species of Israel that the land of Israel has that's special. And we'll be talking a little bit about that, as well as sharing a couple beautiful ideas, meaningful ideas, applicable ideas about Tu BiShvat. And we have a couple great activities, icebreakers that we'll be doing momentarily. Hopefully we'll have the assistance of the JNF co-host, and we can have some breakout rooms done soon. And I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about what Tu BiShvat means. What does it mean to have a Rosh Hashanah, a new year for the trees? They're just trees after all. What are they being judged for? Were they a good tree, a bad tree? I mean, they're just a tree. And an interesting idea I heard was that when trees were created, originally, you didn't eat the fruit of the tree. You didn't eat the apple that you just plucked off like Johnny Appleseed. The actual trunk of the tree was something that was going to be inherently like edible. And unfortunately, the process got transformed and we became very product-based as opposed to being journey-based, if that makes sense. The whole tree itself was something that's supposed to be edible. The journey was supposed to be as meaningful as the destination. But the tree said, I'm going to disagree with that. I'm only going to make that apple edible. The apple will only be the edible part of me. Only that finished product will matter. But in reality, the tree in its real essence is meant to be representative and a reminder to us that the journey, the struggle, the effort, the persistence is something that we have to remember and care about. And I think the essence of Tu BiShvat, and along with several other beautiful ideas that Sean will share momentarily, that's what we're meant to be. Because for those of us who started spring semester already, it's hard. You have to persist through these endless Zooms. And I thank you guys so much for showing up to this Zoom, because I can't imagine doing more Zooms and more Zooms. But we remember that there's a beauty to not just enjoying that sweet apple at the end. There's a beauty to hiking and working through and persisting, because that's what life's all about. It's about the journey and the destination. And trees originally were meant to be a reminder of that. And on Tu BiShvat, as the trees are celebrating their new year, we're not supposed to just sit back and let them have all the fun. We're supposed to enjoy it and remember that and enjoy our journey. And I hope you'll enjoy as we embark, no pun intended, on our journey tonight, and have a wonderful Tu BiShvat. I'm very excited to introduce our next co-host, Sean. And then in a couple of moments, we'll be having an icebreaker as we explain the full topic of this Tu BiShvat Seder, which is themed in an environmentally conscious and friendly manner. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that, and Sarah will discuss how we're making this Tu BiShvat a little bit different than your other nights. So you can ask Manish Tana Halayla Zeh, not just at your Pesach Seder, but at your Tu BiShvat Seder, that this Tu BiShvat Seder will be hopefully different than any other Tu BiShvat Seder that you've been to. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to pass it off to Sarah to speak a little bit about the environment aspect of our Tu BiShvat Seder, and then to Sean.
Should I go now? Or?
Yeah, Sean, I'm just going to pass it straight to you, actually, if that's okay.
So thank you for those awesome words from Sam. I'm Sean. I go to Georgia Tech and I'm involved with Yavneh. And I just kind of want to latch on to a couple of the ideas that he started talking about before we, enter into any of the icebreakers. Tu BiShvat as a concept, it's first talked about in the Mishnah, and it gives a list of 4 different New Years that exists. There's the New Year that we all know about, Rosh Hashanah, that we talked about. There's the Tu BiShvat, the New Year of Trees, and there's 2 other ones. There's the New Year of like tithing cattle, and the New Year of the Kings, which was like a tax day. And so there's not very, other cultures, not many concepts of, trying to create so many New Years for the different aspects of people's lives. But I think that's kind of one thing that Tu BiShvat in general is trying to do. It's trying to create something that is relevant to all our lives. So back then everyone was farmers. So when the first fruits came about, it was a significant day because any of the first fruits past that point were now eligible for taxes pretty much. But why would anyone take a tax day of which are all these days and turn it into a holiday? That's not like a normal type of approach to national holidays. There is a national holiday for tax day, but in general, people don't go out celebrating and people don't go and make a plate full of different foods and drink wine. Like that's not the normal response to these types of things. And so when I look at Tu BiShvat, I kind of try to say, or try to interpret it to mean, the goal of all of this stuff is to kind of bring perspective and relevance back into our lives. It's very easy, especially with COVID, to get so caught up in the flow of how things are going and to completely, look down and the next day you look up and it's 4 months later. But one big part of Judaism, one big part of Tu BiShvat, like specifically, is to take a step back and say, there's so many things that are going on in our lives. So we have to kind of find these bigger pictures and these bigger moments and kind of anchor them down so that we actually have something to look at the times around us in perspective against. And so Tu BiShvat, back then, 1,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago, it might have been a little bit different than what we're experiencing now. Back then, the farmers would have said, okay, great, the trees are, the fruits are blooming. It's the start of a new year. We have food, we have spring coming, all of these great events. It was much more of a physical, relevance to them. But today, maybe you have a fruit tree outside of your house, but most people don't. So kind of to be able to look at Tu BiShvat and say, what is kind of changing in my life right now? What is changing in all our lives right now with the vaccine coming out and with, big events happening all around us? I think it's important to say that this is a day that we can kind of look to the future as something's changing. And so with that, I think we should move on to the rest of the program.
All right, thank you very much. And now to talk a little bit about the Tu BiShvat Seder. So we're structuring this as an environmentally friendly and environmentally conscious Tu BiShvat Seder. Because part of Tu BiShvat is being in tune with the land, in tune with the trees and where the trees grow, and the animals and our furry friends who live amongst the forest and the environment. So our first thing will be an icebreaker in the spirit of ice and oceans, and it's a little bit of a stretch. And unfortunately, we can't do breakout rooms due to technological reasons. And I'm going to have everyone, if they can, for one answer, for the first option, they'll choose the thumbs up emoji. And for the second option, they'll choose the hand clapping emoji. And these are really serious, important questions. And I want full participation by everyone. Sarah will be making sure that everyone's participating. So put a clappy hand emoji if you think Phineas and Ferb was the most important childhood TV show, or put a thumbs up emoji if you think SpongeBob was the most important children's TV show. And I'm voting too. So let's do it. All right. Do we have a clear winner? Wow, this is close. Mikey Genton, Kobe Light, come on, we need your votes. This is important. All right, I think SpongeBob unfortunately took the win on that one. That's okay.
Unfortunately, it's a clap.
No, Phineas and Ferb is so much more important. All right, guys, we're gonna go for, is mint chocolate chip an ice cream flavor or toothpaste? Clappy hands for toothpaste, thumbs up for ice cream.
Jeremy, I'll never forgive you.
All right, I think we can say that mint chocolate chip is ice cream. Thank you very much to everyone who agrees with me that it is one of the better flavors. And those who think it's toothpaste, all right, we'll talk. We'll become friends still. I'm willing to see past differences.
Probably that's
All right.
a problem that really needs to be solved. It's so hard to get mint chocolate chip ice cream in Israel. We gotta put our hands on deck for that.
Ben and Jerry's, they've got the secret. All right, and for our final icebreaker question, all right, here we go. This is my personal favorite one. All right, if you have to put a piece of cereal, if you have to eat a piece of cereal for the rest of your life, like one piece of cereal at a time, like that will be your sustenance, would it either be Fruity Pebbles or a fruit flavored cereal like Fruit Loops, or would it be like a cocoa, like a chocolate one, like Cocoa Puffs or Cocoa Pebbles? So clap your hands for like the chocolatey cereals, and then a thumbs up for the fruit-based cereals. Wow, this is close, but I think the cocoa and the chocolate ones have it, which is really shocking. I was not expecting that, but that's okay. All right, so we're moving on with the Tu BiShvat Seder after a very, very hopefully successful icebreaker. And so something very important when we're talking about the environment is ice related. It's the oceans. And obviously Israel being the foremost and primary focus of us in our JNF, and also just as Jews on campus, we're representing Bnei Israel, Am Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people and the land of Israel and the Torah of Israel. And the oceans is something that you kind of look around and you can be surrounded by water and yet not have a drop to drink. And sometimes it might feel like that if you're on a college campus that's a little bit more out of your zone. If you're coming from, say, the old city and you're going to places like Gainesville or Ithaca or Wisconsin or California, across the country. And you can be all the way out there, and yet there's something totally different, even though it looks similar to water, but it's just a little bit different. But there's something so impactful about the ocean, because a drop of water is not the ocean, and yet it is a part of the ocean, and it is inherently the ocean. It's kind of like our relationship to God. It's like we all have a piece of God within us, and yet we are not God, and all of us have, and all of us collected, and all of us together, and only when we are unified, that's when the drops of the ocean come together. And that's what the ocean is made out of. And just a quick thought about JNF and what they're doing is the ocean represents either opportunity and progress and growth, or it could represent just absolute submission and saying surrender and saying we can't drink this water. And JNF has decided to take the step forward and say, we look at this water, we say that this is Maim Chaim, this is life water. We can transform it through desalinization plants. We can use this water for life and for growing. And it's not just something that we look at and we see it's a problem. And that represents an absolute, Weltanschauung, as Rav Soloveitchik would say. It's a world, it's a perception. How do you perceive this world? Do you view the waters as ocean water, as bitter, as something impossible to drink and it's useless and worthless? Or do you say, this is something that we can work with? And I think JNF, when they saw that there's all this ocean and yet Israel has no drinkable water, instead of just saying, all right, we'll just buy water bottles for the rest of our lives, they said, let's change this. Let's step up. Let's transform something. Let's recognize that we are all part of this greater whole, and we can use that. And that's just a quick idea about oceans. I'm going to pass it off to Sean for another idea.
Right. So when it comes to water, especially with Israel, it's almost amazing to think about certain things. And so, first of all, Israel with their water projects, in the 70s, they kind of brought water to a desert. That fact by itself is absolutely insane. I'm not sure how many people here have really been to a desert in the middle of nowhere, but when you go there, it's just miles upon miles upon miles of sand. And to think that all in the middle and the driest places on earth that you can bring just tons and tons of water gushing around is absolutely insane. So the very fact that there is a concept of greenification where you're turning a desert into green areas, it is absolutely insane, and something that I feel we really need to not take for granted, especially in regard to Israel. And the second fact that I find really, really inspiring is that Israel recycles 80% of their water. And so that it's by far the highest percentage in the world. I think the second is like 20% or something in Korea or something. But just to kind of go back a little bit, and this is kind of my engineering coming out a little bit, but water is kind of such a simple thing. It's, just 3 atoms together, stuck together, and it comes with all these amazing properties, and it's essential for all of life. But when it comes to the practical applications of that water, meaning how do you distribute it amongst people, how you make sure you don't run out of it, and how to clean it, how to process it, all these different things, it becomes a really, really, really complex problem really, really quickly. And so when you're a country like Israel and you have to manage water, it seems like a very simple problem, but it's really not. And so this idea of 80% recycling of water, it's not just a nice statistic. It's kind of an essential fact. When you don't have enough water, you have to really go to the craziest of places to find it. And so even though it may not be nice to think about, when we're talking about water, it comes from everywhere. It comes from toilets, it comes from kitchens, it comes from the gutters and sinks, and the process of cleaning it and the process of reusing it, it may not be clean and it may not be nice, but in the end of the day, it brings new life to things that you might have thought were completely over with. And I think that idea by itself is something that kind of represents the contrast of what Sam was talking about. When water is life and growth and opportunity, sometimes it can be really found in the grossest and overlooked places. It can be found in our own waste. It can be found in places that we really don't want to go to. But sometimes when you don't have enough around you, you have to look and be creative about how you use these types of things. So I think that's kind of an interesting take on what water and what this very basic but important thing can kind of mean.
All right, and I just wanted to share a brief idea, but before I do, I want to ask everyone a question, because I know whenever I'm zooming, I'm not really paying so much attention. So we're gonna use the clap your hands and thumbs again. So clap your hands if you think there was a country, could be multiple countries, or just at least one country that entered into the 21st century with more trees than they started off with 100 years prior, or a thumbs up emoji if you think there were no countries. But counterintuitive, but thumbs up if you think there were no countries and no country entered into the 21st century with more trees, or clap your hands emoji if you think one country or multiple countries did that. So let's see. Oh boy, it looks like we have a lot of JNF people here. You guys all know the secret. Wow, I don't see I see one thumbs up by my boss, Rabbi Shulman. Go figure. Okay, well, he's about to learn something tonight. Thank God. So everyone who clapped their hands, which is everyone except Rabbi Shulman, who actually lives in Israel right now and he's awake at 2 a.m. in the morning. Wanted to give him a shout out for that. But Israel was the only country in the world that entered into the 21st century with more trees than they had 100 years prior. And it's not stopping. It's not just a one-off event because we started, with 0 trees and we made the desert bloom. That is a consistent effort. That was an intentional act that we're doing to create, the classic blue tzedakah boxes, to create these forests, to plant these trees, to establish that this is our land, and we're not just going to let it lay fallow. We're going to actually plant. We're going to make beautification and forest happen here. This is important to us. And just a little bit more than the forests that are going on there, there's actually these really interesting parks in Israel. There's 2 of them. They're called biospheric parks. And it's a big word, and I have to look it up, but that's okay. I did it for this Zoom. And biospheric parks are special environments where it's not just a forest or not just a kibbutz, but it's a combination of the land and the people. It's not just something that is nature running its course and we can't touch it. We're finding a way to be involved with the nature, to sustain it, to preserve it, and also to constantly cultivate and create it. That's how we can get these great slogans like "we made cherry tomatoes." That's amazing. Or "these were grown in the Arava, these are grown in the desert." There's something special if you've ever been to Israel and you're taking one of those green buses down south and you're like, oh my God, there's so much sand. But then all of a sudden you hit, Beersheba. And it's just crazy that in the middle of all that desert, there's green and there's beauty to that. There's so much inspiration that can be drawn that in a 4-hour bus ride from Jerusalem to Eilat, and you're just going down through the desert, through nothing. But there is this potential. And if we remember that at any point in that infinite sea of desert, At any point, any one of us could decide that this can be a forest, this can be a biospheric park where animals and humans and trees and streams can all get along with respecting each other's boundaries and looking forward to creating and harnessing to create a better future by harnessing the power that we have as working together and cooperating, and not just taking the natural resources and abusing them for profit, but to really understand this is our backyard, this is our front yard, this is our home, and we're going to treat it like that. And these biospheric parks established with the assistance of JNF are in a very apropos place in Israel. It's in the original Shevet Menashe. It's in where the tribe of Menashe had their piece of land. And any parent here, I know we're college kids, but so when we go home to our parents, we get the blessing. The boys are blessed to be like Ephraim and Menashe. The girls are blessed to be like the Sarah, Rachel, and Leah, to be like the mothers, the matriarchs. And it's interesting that we're not blessed to be like the patriarchs. We're blessed to be like two kids, Ephraim and Menashe, Joseph's children. What's so special about these two guys, And the Lubavitch Rebbe explains that these were the first two Jews ever to be born out of Israel. And specifically, they were born in the diametrically opposed country of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, a place that is absolutely antagonistic towards Judaism, to Jewish values, to caring, to cooperating, to respecting. And when we bless our children to be like Ephraim and Menashe, remember the story of how they were blessed in the first place. Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, calls over Joseph, his son, and says, bring me my grandchildren. I'd like to bless them before I pass. And Joseph brings his children, Yaakov's grandchildren, to be blessed. And then Jacob says something really strange. Jacob turns to Joseph and says, who are these guys? What do you mean? You said to bring your grandchildren. Who do you think I brought? An Uber driver? Delivery route? Like, come on, these are your grandchildren. You've seen them before at family events, on Shabbat, on Sabbath. So what's really going on? So the Lubavitch Rebbe explains, when Jacob asked, who are these? What does it mean, who are they? Who are they really? Are they Jews who happen to be born in Egypt, or the Egyptians who happen to be Jews? And that's a very powerful question that we have to ask ourselves. And we answer that we are Jews, no matter where we are, no matter what campus we are, whether it's YU or Yerushalayim or Gainesville or Georgia or Ithaca or Massachusetts. We're Jews. We put our Jewish values first. We care about each other. We care about the world. We want to work together. We want to cooperate. We're making the right decisions as a whole. And we understand that part of that means looking out for the environment, looking out for each other. And when we bless our sons, when we bless or we receive that blessing to be like Ephraim and Menashe, we remember that. We make that conscious decision. And that's a beautiful idea. And Ephraim and Menashe may be our past, but the past is the key to the future. Just as the same way that the environment is the key to the future of our physical life, because without preserving and caring about the environment, the forest, we will sacrifice oxygen and basic things like that. And so that biospheric park in Shevet Menashe, JNF might not have ever imagined that they're securing not only our spiritual future, but they're definitely securing our physical future as well. And with that in mind, I would hope to give us all the chizuk, the inspiration, the motivation, that we remember that we are connected simultaneously to our past, and through connecting to our past, we are able to secure and preserve and safeguard and ensure our future, just as in the same way that when we care about our environment, we are simultaneously allowing ourselves to live for the present, allow our children and our children's children, just as Jacob did when he blessed his grandchildren, to be there for the next generation and to continue, so we can tell that story at the Pesach Seder or Passover as we leave Egypt, and we say, you know who left Egypt? We can also say that at Tu BiShvat Seder, because we're not just Jews, we're not just caring about environment or our friends or our neighbors one time a year, but even on a random Tuesday, Wednesday night during the week. And I'd like to pass off for the next idea, for the next part of the Seder, to Sean.
Perfect. So just another idea about trees. It's kind of crazy to think about. So in terms of systems in the world that exist, things that play off of one another and work with each other, trees and people or animals are kind of one of the oldest ones that we are a part of. We breathe out carbon, and trees are kind of built on the carbon. The bark accumulates it, and they grow stronger and bigger straight from our waste. And so that type of cycle is obviously very nice symbolically, but it's also a very physical thing. And so as we go and look out in the world today, when we have these give and takes and cycles, I think it's kind of appropriate to think about that type of thing as well in regards to the New Year of Trees, how we fit into our own environments and how we should interplay with other type of people. If we're not contributing and taking advantage of and helping everything around us, then we're not really living up to the ideal that's been set up for us. And so I think it's very thematic that, JNF's kind of almost mascot is this idea of a tree, because it really is just such a powerful metaphor for the interplay that we really need to have for our environment and for ourselves. And so I think we'll go on to the next idea, the next cup, which is animal habitats. And so what would most likely, come after water, trees, the basic components. So we want to talk about that third part of the system, which is animals. And so JNF is actually developing and preserving all, like we were talking about, these biospheric parks and the forest parks. And so we talked about the tree part of it, but it's very important in terms of diversity to have all these types of animals that really can't exist without the different trees that are crucial to their habitats, and also other plants. And so, Sam talked a lot about it already, but why do we care about diversity in general when it comes to the environment? Why not just let all the animals die and we all live our lives and go on with it? This is something that's not talked about so much. People always say we want biodiversity and we want the environment to be better, but they don't always give a reason as to why that's important. And I think it comes from an appreciation of like how complex the systems that exist in our world are. When you look at, if you go into a rainforest or into the desert even, it looks kind of just like a static system. It looks like something that always was and always will be, and it'll just always exist. But if you spend a year there, 2 years there, 3 years there, and start to really analyze all the different animals and start to gain a familiarity with how everything works, it kind of grows on you how insanely complex it really is. Every single animal has interactions with 4 or 5 different other things. Every plant survives based on the fact that 5 or 6 animals are feeding on it and living on it and spreading its seeds and all this type of stuff. And we as humans are pretty bad with complexity. We like to keep things simple. And as soon as you bring complexity into the issue, we kind of shy away from it and we look the other way and we pretend it's much simpler than it is. And so we end up just saying, oh, biodiversity is great. And we want all the animals to be alive. It's great. But when it comes to why, the truth is that it's really hard to give an answer as to why, because there is no single answer. Every single animal has its own different purpose in its own environment, and every single tree has its own purpose in its own environment, and every single part of the system has its own purpose. And if you take out one, the consequences of that aren't very clear. The reason that we care about biodiversity, and the reason we care about all these different interplays beyond just we want their existence, is that the effects of what we do are not very well known by us. We really don't know how we affect the world. And that is a kind of a scary thought, to know that as people, our actions really can result in unintended consequences first. And second of all, just unknown consequences. We might not know what effects we're having until 20, 30 years down the line. And that has a very kind of practical implication in the immediate sense, but it also has a kind of symbolic sense, which is we want to be very intentional. We want to be very purposeful of how we live our lives. It's very good to know that what we're doing has an effect here and now. But it's also really, really important to recognize that what we do now might not have an immediate effect. It might only have an effect in 30 to 40 years, good or bad. And humans aren't necessarily always in control of those consequences. Sometimes it simply comes out of nowhere. And what we as people need to do is be very careful as to what we're doing, because we can never know what the consequences are. So we should think very carefully about our actions and our habits in life and their effects on the environment and everyone else, because if we don't be very, very, very careful about it, we're very, very likely to have unintended consequences. And so I think we should kind of embrace the changes and complexity that happen, but also recognize that in the big picture of things, we don't have control of these things all the time. And so we have to be careful to counteract that complexity.
Amazing, amazing. I'm going to start off my next topic with a quick request to have Jeremy Tibbetts spotlighted, please. That can be done. Thank you. All right, we spoke a lot about animals and the importance of maintaining their habitats. I want everyone to take a good quick look at Jeremy's beard and just send a Zoom chat message to Jeremy with what animal do you think his beard most looks like. The funniest response will get a shout out in 30 seconds. So I personally think it reminds me of like my friend had a pet hedgehog once. So it's giving me those vibes. So seriously, guys, send him that message. I got permission prior. I'm not embarrassing him in public, I promise, or on Facebook forever. So send him a message, and the winner in 30 seconds will be announced with what the funniest thing was. And I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe I should just read some of these out loud as I'm getting them. Here's what I'm getting so far. I'm getting goat. That hurts. Lion. The tree bark frog. A brown lemur, and beaver. That's what I've gotten so far. Let's see if anybody else comes through, but the one that hurt the most has got to be goat. So I don't know if that's what determines what wins, but just got hit with giraffe also. Alpaca.
Amazing, amazing. I think we'll put a pause on. I think the giraffe was just way too off of a call. I don't know. I've yet to see Jeremy in person, but I don't think he's that tall, unfortunately. But speaking of, sorry?
We also got guinea pig just now, which is
A baby giraffe.
honestly pretty good. It's honestly pretty good.
Guinea pig. I think guinea pig won. Who was that? We'll give him a shout out.
That was actually Marnie.
Wow. That was not planned at all. Zero collusion right there. Wow. All right. We will give you something exciting afterwards. So Jeremy's beard is very beautiful, and it reminds us of guinea pigs and giraffes and wolves and goats and alpacas. Did alpacas make the list? No, they did. Thank God. And they all need places to live. And we spoke about before that JNF and Israel entered the 21st century with more trees than they started with. And just how many trees do you guys think Israel has right now because of JNF, and also just because there's this focus on conservation and ecology and environmental consciousness? So we're gonna do a quick thumbs up, clappy hands, heart, and smiley face. We got 4 options. This is a big one. So since 1901, how many trees has JNF helped plant in Israel? Clappy hands will be 20 million. Thumbs up will be 40 million. Heart will be 400 million. And then the smiley face with tears coming out will be 250 million trees. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, we got a couple people who got it. So JNF has planted just over 250 million trees, and each year JNF plants 3 million trees. Congrats to Sean for getting it right there. Good job. And
You got it wrong.
you got it wrong?
400
That's
million.
okay. I was still giving you credit. You're doing a great job. And to plant 250 million trees, you're averaging millions and millions of trees each year. And it's not just JNF doing it alone, planting trees, but for my bar mitzvah, and I'm sure for many other people's, b'nai mitzvot, for their bar mitzvah, they had the opportunity to actually get down, get dirty, plant a tree that their parents bought them, grandparents bought them, or someone who maybe couldn't have been there bought for them. And it's a really special moment when you're involving the youth, as we spoke about before, to plant these trees, to plant these forests, to see that what they're doing will be there within the next year, 5 years, 10, 50 years. Whenever they come back, if they remember exactly where they went that day when they planted that tree, they'll be able to tell their kids, their friends, their family, that's a tree right there that I planted. And now it's way taller than I am, but I held it when it was that big. And a forest as a whole has a lot of messages and a lot of meaning to it, because it starts so small, so minuscule. You might even neglect, you might not even realize when you're walking through a forest. When I had the privilege to go on a gap year last year before everything went crazy, we walked through what was going to become a forest. And if you didn't know it, you would never have understood the magnitude of what was occurring in that moment. You're walking through something that, God willing, in 60 years, you won't be able to see the stars. That's how many trees there will be. And sometimes in life, there are so many moments where we're walking through forest and we just don't know it yet. They're just too small. It just needs a little bit more time and energy, effort, or compassion. And part of growing, raising a family, a neighborhood, a community on campus, off campus, is just like raising a forest. You might not recognize that that person who you just asked to sit and have lunch with them, or that person you're giving a ride on a rainy day, that person is a little sapling, a little tree. They can grow so tall and so strong. They can grow to become part of a network. Here's a crazy fun fact I learned today in my environment class. Trees talk to each other. I don't know what language they speak to, but their roots can connect and communicate with each other. And that way they can share resources and nutrients and information. And it's mind blowing. They've got almost like a tree web, like Twitter almost. And when we have these opportunities in life to recognize that we're walking through what could become a forest, but the difference between a forest and what could become a forest is how we respond and how we act. If we walk through that grass lot and we don't appreciate what's there, and we trample over things and we disrespect it and we disregard, then that forest will never be a forest. It will always be the empty lot. It might even get turned into something that is absolutely the opposite of what that forest had the potential to become. But when we walk through what looks like possibly that barren wasteland of the desert, or looks like just an empty lot, and we understand a little bit of patience, care, respect, guidance even, that can utterly transform someone's entire existence, give them new purpose, inspiration, hope for a better future, a better tomorrow, and can change them and transform them from that little sapling into a gigantic tree. And just on a personal level, imagine you're a seed for a moment. Close your eyes. I'm gonna look at everyone's screens right now. Close your eyes. Come on. Thank you for closing your eyes, those who did it. Now imagine you're a seed and you're being planted into the ground. You're being buried alive. Is that terrifying? You're being buried alive, and then it gets worse. You're being drowned. You're being poured water over. Now, if you're a seed, you're freaking out. You're panicking. You can open your eyes now. Imagine if I told you that you're going to turn into an amazing tree. You'd probably say, I'm crazy, I'm psychotic, you're burying me alive, and you're drowning me. I don't really enjoy any of those activities. But to understand and perceive it from the perspective of a tree, or with hindsight, the seed can understand and appreciate that those experiences, those challenges, were not things that the seed, would fail and die and succumb to, but that seed would surmount and prevail and triumph over, and ultimately be transformed into an entirely new, better human being, better seed, better tree. And there are moments in our life, especially with the pandemic, with grades coming out, whatever it might be, or it might feel that we're being buried alive, or we're being drowned and buried alive, both not fun experiences. But if we can understand that we are seeds, we have the opportunity to grow and to surmount, to prevail, to persist, to succeed in the end, no pun intended again, then we have the opportunity. That's when we become trees, and we can stand tall, plant our roots firmly in the ground, and yet reach for the heavens. Because we understand that a little bit of water, a little bit of dirt, those aren't going to kill us, not going to drown us. That's what's going to be our source of strength, the source for our future. And when we have that mindset, a growth mindset, that's when we can change the world. That's when we can change the lots into forests. That's when we can change a bunch of random strangers into community. That's just as Yavneh tries to have us do on campus and JNF has in Israel, where they try to change the deserts and the seas into really amazing opportunities for the people and land of Israel. And that's something that we can't take for granted, because it only takes one person to look at a scenario, situation, an environment and say, nah, this can be so much better. This can be so much more, because we're seeds. So I hope we can all see that. And I want to pass off for the next part of the Seder to Sean.
Thank you. Thank you. And so the last part of the Seder is kind of the thing that brings it all together. And it's this concept of Tikkun Olam, which I want to talk about for a little bit, because it's very interesting why Tikkun Olam has kind of become a rallying cry for a lot of the social change that we want to see in the world. Literally, it means fixing the world. So seemingly, it seems like a great kind of phrase to work with when we want to make the world a better place. But if you look at the earliest usages of it, it kind of does not mean that in the way we want. So if you look at in the Gemara and the Talmud, the word Tikkun Olam actually means administration changes, like very boring kind of things that if you didn't have them, society wouldn't function. It's not the kind of the inspirational reach we go for, it's the bare minimum. And when you think about it, why would people choose that as the rallying cry? What doesn't Tikkun Olam want to be this inspirational thing where we all come together and make something great, go beyond all the expectations, go beyond the limits, kind of go above the law to really do something great for the world? But Jewish law doesn't look at it like that. Judaism always looked at Tikkun Olam as kind of this bare minimum thing that if you don't do it, the world will just fall into pieces. And while that may seem a little bit like tempering the idea, it actually could be the opposite. It could be something a lot more rewarding, because Judaism views Tikkun Olam not as something that you have an option to do, that, oh, maybe I can be greater and help fix the world. It views it as an obligation, as if you don't do these things, the world will simply not work. The world will simply fall apart. If you don't reach out to your neighbor, if you don't try to improve the environment, if you don't really care and look at how you're living your life, you may think it's going all right and it'll just be the same, but slowly it's being degraded to the point where you're going to lose everything. And this is kind of a more of a demand than what we thought Tikkun Olam was. It really puts the obligation and the impetus on us to do something right now. Not because we necessarily want to, but because we need to. And I think that's kind of the real idea that we really need to focus on when we talk about Tikkun Olam. It's not an option, it's a need. Because if we don't take action, if we don't really go after the causes we believe in when it comes to the environment and it comes to Israel, these things can very easily kind of slip away. Maybe not in their entirety at once, but slowly but surely. And we see that clearly with the environment today. A lot of places are kind of slowly slipping away that yesterday, 40 years ago, they were fine. But all of a sudden, drastic events are happening all over the place because of the slow and steady change that happens when we don't take Tikkun Olam seriously. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Sam to talk a little bit more.
Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about the date of Tu BiShvat. So tonight is actually Tet Vav, Tet being 9 in the Gematria and Vav being 6, and 9 plus 6 is the 15th night. And a lot of amazing things happen around this time of the month in Judaism, between the 14th of Passover and 14th of Sukkot and the 14th of Purim. And yet this is almost like one day off. What's going on? That is the 15th. And I think we have to understand and remember that most months are 30 days. And this is the halfway point. And what does it mean to come halfway? It's a great song about being halfway there. And I'm not going to sing it for you now, because I don't want to get any noise complaints from the neighbors. But being halfway there means you're at exactly the focal point to reflect and introspect and look forward and move forward. And when we understand that on Tu BiShvat, just as the trees are always growing, just as the rings on the inside are always growing, we have the opportunity as well. A tree doesn't get told by the doctor, you're going to be this tall. Your mommy tree was this tall, your daddy tree was this tall. This is how tall you're going to get. Tree has no limitations. The tree is just going to keep doing what it's doing, provided it has the same healthy nutrients and environment that's conducive for its growth. And that's a very simple idea, but I think it often gets overlooked about what does it mean to grow. A lot of times we limit ourselves. What are you doing? Oh, I'm in school. I'm a political science major. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. We limit ourselves. You're not a lawyer. You're not a doctor. You're not a college student. You're a human being. You're not even a human being. You're a human becoming, because a human being is something that is finite. It's done. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to grow. We're a human becoming, because we're never done. A hamburger is done. A hamburger can be finished and it can be well done. And it's a tragedy, because we're not hamburgers. We're human becomings. We are always growing. We should never limit ourselves in any type of sense. And part of Tu BiShvat is understanding and recognizing that just because they're trees and they might appear to be inanimate objects, or they might appear to be worthless, or something that we might not even smell as we walk to class or walk to shul or walk to wherever it might be if we're walking these days. And then with our mask, it makes it so much harder to feel that we should even care about them. But trees, they just are there. They're constantly in the present. There's no phones, there's no distractions for trees. And there's so much that can be gained from just taking a couple moments and stepping out into nature. And I think a couple moments in our Judaism, we have the opportunity to really pause and have that moment. I think one of them, the most frequent one of that is Shabbat, is the Sabbath. That once a week, every single week, we get to stop time. In 50, 60 years from now, psychologists will be studying the Jews who disconnect from the world willingly, voluntarily, and yet can come back into it Saturday night. I mean, it's a crazy concept to put your phone away for 25 hours if you decide to do that. And to have that self-control, and to have that self-restraint, and to have the presence of mind, to be living in the present, that's something that you can't mimic, you can't fake. There's no app that can give you a shortcut to feeling the now, the present, for so much time. And on Shabbat, we have this opportunity of spiritual time, because time is just the measurement of physical movement. You can't really experience time. You can't experience or measure things. You can't measure time for things that are experiential. You can't measure, in a sense of time, how do I feel about someone? How does this make me feel? Did I enjoy this? You can't measure that with time. And on Shabbat, we're deciding to measure things not by time, not by productivity, not by how much this achieves, this makes. No, we're saying on Shabbat, we're measuring how much this matters, what is important. It is a reset button every single week. Do my values align with who I want to be? Am I working? And am I moving in the right directions? Am I making progress? Am I growing as a human becoming, or am I a human being? And once a week, we have the opportunity to understand and to reflect that we can be like the trees. You know, the trees were created before man. Isn't that nuts? Here we are, the pinnacle of creation. Adam Harishon, the first man, God made him on the sixth day. After every other part of nature, from the fish to the trees to the shrubs. Why? Why is that? If we're so great, why weren't we made first? You know? And I think it's important that we understand that there is a value to looking what came before us, looking what will become after us, to understand that these trees, they have the potential to grow, they're limitless, and also always in the present. And in today's day and age, where there's unending Zooms, there's unending emails, unending WhatsApp pings, you're never free. You're never truly in the moment. Even right now, I'm getting unlimited emails and notifications. It's crazy. But my bracha is all of us, we can always be in the present. I'm going to pass it to Sean now.
So I think we're kind of nearing the end of the Seder. So we've completed, going through water, the base material. We went through the trees themselves. We went through animals, like the relationship between trees and the kind of connection around them. And this idea of Tikkun Olam, which is our place in this world and what we need to do to save it all. And so I think with that, we should kind of all be focusing and thinking about what are the real changes around us that we can do in our local place and in our communities, in Israel, and in the places where we can have real impact. Today, we live in a global world where, with social networks and work and everything can be done instantaneously over large distances, over, great divides. And that tends to make us forget about the people that are closest to us and the ideas that are closest to us. And I think with Tu BiShvat, one thing that we can try to focus on is trees, they don't care about what's going on the other side of the world immediately. They care only about what's going on in their forest in regards to what they can focus on. And they thrive because of that. We as people as well, if we get too involved with things that are out of our control and things that are far beyond what we can do and what we can know, we'll also not thrive. We have to really focus on what's around us and what we can do a change on. And so when we look at our own lives and our own communities and our own beliefs, the reason that they're important is because, yes, they have intrinsic value, but also because they're ours. And so we have to take responsibility and really try to look at what we can do for our communities and ourselves. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. And I think Sarah had something to say before we ended.
I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. It's great to see all of you. And I'm really glad that we've been able to celebrate Tu BiShvat together. I'm going to pass it to Jeremy to finish up.
Thank you all again so much for coming. Thank you to Sam, Sarah, and to Sean for facilitating this kind of this journey that really, like you said, really comes kind of through the whole span of nature. There's actually an old kind of on the civil law books. There's an old law that actually used to exist a long time ago in the Middle East. I think it still is a thing in Jordan. One of the ways that they would apportion out property when you didn't know where, if there wasn't a deed to a land, kind of in a time before deeds, one of the ways that you'd be able to determine who owned land was based on who had been tending the trees in that area. You think about it with a tree, everything really comes back to a tree. Before there were homes, before there were countries, governments, all that stuff, what does a tree provide? A tree is a marker that there's water nearby. A tree provides shade. It provides food. It provides wood that you can use to build. Really, everything really comes back in some ways to the tree. There are whole cultures who kind of envision the entire world as a tree. We said, Ki Adam Etz Hasadeh. Humans are kind of compared to trees at times. So it's really a very beautiful idea. So I wanted to just thank you all for kind of walking us through a little bit of that, helping us think about how, we can also be changing the forests of our lives, right? Not missing the forests for the trees, not missing the trees for the forests. I want to lift up one more time again, Sam, Sarah, and Sean, you did amazing. And one more time, just some of the amazing programs that the JNF has going on. We're doing this kind of amazing alternative break trip. You can find out more about that on the JNF website. And then tomorrow night, there's this amazing program, Forest Fires and Firefighters, the U.S.-Israeli Brotherhood. It's sure to be an amazing, amazing program. So don't miss out. And with that, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming. Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Shkoyach. Thank you so much for this. This was awesome.